So take a look at this article. How I Became a Far-Right Radical. This came out last week. I saw it yesterday and I found it very interesting because it's kind of exactly like me. And it describes me and the men's rights movement very well. It's by a comedian and a podcast host named Lou Perez. I've linked his podcast down below. I didn't know him all that well before this article, so I just went on his website and kind of looked around at the stuff that he's done. And he's clearly not a far right radical at all. And that's what this article is about. The fact that he was kind of falsely labeled as far right. Just because every once in a while he might say something that someone perceives as being, oh, that's too far to the right, or that doesn't agree with me completely, so I'm going to label this a far right radical. And this is something that I think has happened a lot in the last 5 years. And this election has really showed how divided people are. And this is a problem I think people have where they immediately label someone as far right, far left, radical, extremist, hateful, supremacist, racist, sexist. And while those things and those people do exist, I think we've got to a point now where it's so extreme that people label anyone who has any kind of different idea as, oh, they're one of those people. They're on the other side. They're the enemy. And I'll be honest, I've been guilty of that myself too. Sometimes when I see someone say, oh, I'm a feminist, I start associating all the negative ideas and all the negative things that I've seen with feminists, all the radical feminists and the extreme feminists that I've talked about on this channel. I think, oh, maybe that's one of them. When in reality, I think most people aren't like that. Most people aren't radical or aren't extreme. But this is a criticism of the men's rights movement, and I have gotten all the time. I get called a right-wing radical all the time just for being an MRA. So let's take a look at this article. So I've linked the article down in the description below. It's a very good article. And the thing is, I actually don't even know if I completely agree with Lou Perez on all of his politics. I don't even totally know what his politics are. That's not really the point. Because whether he's left or right or pro-feminist or pro-MRA, I don't even know. But what I do know is that the experience he went through of being labeled a far-right radical is something that I can relate to. Because the very same thing happened to me. And the way he feels like he's being labeled and mischaracterized as something that he's not is an experience that I can share. And I went through the same thing. So let's see what he says. I've been put on a list, and not a good one. It isn't the Hollywood Reporter's Next Gen Class of 2020 or Forbes 30 under 30. Forget the accolade, I take being under 30 again. That would be so much better for my career than where I am now. A comedian approaching 39 who finds his work labeled far right in an academic paper titled Evaluating the Scale, Growth, and Origins of the Right-Wing Echo Chambers on YouTube. So basically, this guy found himself being labeled in some academic paper as part of the far right-wing echo chamber on YouTube. Like part of this whole extreme, radical, right-wing, alt-right movement. That I've talked about the same thing happening to me. Suddenly being labeled as part of this thing when you don't feel that way at all. So this paragraph, I think, is the most important paragraph in the article, and the paragraph that I think kind of sums up the main point and the crux of the issue. Take a look. At first, I found it odd that the words fascism, racism, and terrorism were missing from the paper, because these terms have become inextricably linked to the far right. Then I realized it was a smart and cowardly move on the part of the authors to leave them out. Just use the umbrella term far right and allow your readers to fill in the tactic isms. That way, you don't risk being called out for labeling people who are not fascists, racists, and terrorists as such. Instead, the study is being peppered with nebulous adjectives like extreme and radical, which allow readers to see their own boogeymen. In other words, if they don't really define what the alt-right or what extreme right-wing means, they kind of let people's own perceptions and own biases take over and fill in those gaps. So if someone is kind of thinking about MRAs as being right-wing extreme, they read an article like that and they can kind of fill that blank in themselves. Oh, he must mean like that person. He must mean like a men's rights activist. He must mean like a feminist. He must mean like this or that or them or they or whatever the case may be. By not specifically defining what the alt-rights or far rights or radical is, it lets people kind of make their own definitions and kind of label whoever they want as far right or radical or extreme or whatever the case may be, or far left. This could go really anyway. Anybody who makes a definition that doesn't really have a definition is leaving it open to interpretation and manipulation. And a lot of times, people aren't even doing this on purpose because they're so conditioned by everyone else around them saying and doing the same thing that that's kind of a state of mind people can fall into. And again, even I've been guilty of this. Even I've had times when I've been in this state of mind too, where I make these automatic quick judgments. I mean, just take a look at some articles you see about the men's rights movement, calling us terrorists, calling us Nazis, and all this stuff about how we're extreme alt rights and right wing radicals. And for me, those articles are totally crazy. I mean, that's not me at all. And that's not the men's rights movement at all. But I know a lot of people actually believe these articles because that's the image that they have. So they're not wrong to think why they think the way that they do. It's just the way they understand the men's rights movement and the way I understand the men's rights movement are two very different things. I think part of the problem is that when someone has a belief or an ideology that they truly feel is right, and they feel that their views are that of equality and fairness and morality, then it's easy to perceive someone criticizing those views as criticizing those values, like criticizing the sense of equality or criticizing the sense of morality. An example I get a lot, people say, well, if you're anti-feminist, it must mean that you're against equality and you're against women's rights. Because feminism just means equality for all and equality for women. So if you're anti-feminist, that must mean that you're anti-woman. Where, of course, MRAs might have problems with particular feminists because of things they do or say that we don't feel is in the sense of fairness or equality. And that, of course, goes both ways, too. As an MRA, I feel that my views are good and right, and I believe in equality and fairness for everybody. But of course, I see articles like this calling the men's rights movement sexist, extreme, misogynistic, radical, right wing, all of that. And part of me, when I read these articles, I think, well, this person is obviously misandristic. They're sexist against men. They don't believe in men's rights, and they don't care about men's issues. But then part of me thinks, well, maybe this person just has a misunderstanding of what the men's rights movement is. Maybe this person does believe in equality, but they think that MRAs are against equality. So for them, being anti-MRA is a good thing. And it's a misunderstanding rather than a disagreement of basic values.
If you find this is happening to you and you're kind of being pushed into or kind of falling into this us versus them mentality where you're starting to see other people as the enemy or as the other side, this might be a good question to ask yourself. Who are they and what do they believe? Who is this other side that you feel so against, that you feel is so wrong? You feel this strong disagreement with them. What is it you think that they believe? Who are they? And why do you think they believe what they do? Why do you think you and they disagree so much?
I think this is a big problem today. The way that we are so much entrenched in this idea that if you're not completely with me, you're completely against me. And if you have these ideas, then you're completely one of them. Like if you're an MRA, you're a radical, you're a white supremacist. You know, if you're liberal, then you're a radical feminist, you're a radical anarchist, whatever it is. And that's just not how people really are. So I found this article interesting. I linked it down below. And New Year, Happy New Year to everybody. Happy holidays. I've been missing a little bit, but I am going to be back now doing videos again. So tell me what you think in the comments below.